Okay, welcome to another Belmont Plateau Hall of Fame podcast. I'm your host, Dave Thomas. Today we have another legendary distance runner from Philadelphia, who's had a long and successful career in all the distance disciplines, from cross country to track to on the road. His career spanned from the 1950s to up around 2000 or so, or longer. So, as a master runner, this year he's going to be inducted into our ninth class for a Belmont Plateau Hall of Fame, which honors people or coaches or administrators who've had very successful careers and contributed to the history of Philadelphia distance running. We welcome Bill Clarke to our show. Little bit about Bill. Bill started way back in, like I said, the 50s with Cardinal Dougherty High School, and ran some decent cross country, but mostly known on the track for the Philadelphia Catholic League, winning the 880 PCL championship with a time of 155. From there, he was recruited and ran up at Notre Dame University for a number of years, competing in a few cross country championships for Notre Dame. He was an IC4A champion in the 2 mile and scored, very well at the NCAA level with a best place finish of second place in the national championship for cross country. And then from there, had a long road career. That's where he really started taking off and a really long, successful road career, dominating the roads, coming in second in the Boston Marathon, came in the top 10 a few times in Boston, won the Philadelphia Marathon, and then had a controversial year, which we'll talk about, in 1968, winning the quote unquote first Olympic trials of the 10,000 meters, but was left off that team. He was a six-time finished in the top six a few times in the national 10,000 meters, and was a member of a couple of those world cross country teams. One that went to Scotland, was the first runner for America on those teams. And then from there, competed in 1972 Olympics, the 10,000 meters and in the marathon there. And, after that, just kept running on the roads and running on the roads. I think you have a total of, counted 41 victories in like some type of road race, that kind of thing. I'm excited to talk to you, Bill. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. Well, first we'll start way back when, 1957, I believe. That was when I was born. So you're running strong at Cardinal Dougherty. So, we're going to touch on that a little bit. What was your experiences, first of all, running back in those days, way before the running boom, in the Philadelphia Catholic League, and, we'll get you started in the running.
Well, I was very fortunate that when I went to Dougherty in the fall of 1957, Jack Saint Clair was the coach there. He was in his third year, and he instantaneously had developed high-quality teams at Dougherty with his knowledge. Jack, I think he's already in the hall, so you probably know that he went to Penn State, and he was the captain of their NCAA cross-country team that won the championships, and just a great guy. He provided a lot of motivation for us, and obviously excellent training. So that was 57. I was not a very great runner right away. It took me a while to build up my strength. I went to Dougherty. I didn't know anything about cross country or track. I actually went out for the football team, but for some reason they didn't need a 5-foot, 90-pound football player. So fortunately, they cut me after 2 days, and I had to decide between track, cross country, and soccer. And one of my cousins went to LaSalle, Peter Clarke, and he had been a successful runner the year before. He was a year ahead of me, and he ran some good 800s, 880s at LaSalle. So that motivated me to try it as well. And like I said, we started off easy. Saint had us run around the block which I put many miles on, the block around Dougherty. And we didn't have a track. We didn't have a cross-country course, so we ran mostly on the streets. And the first workout was to just run that 1 mile around the block, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't get up the hills. So I was pretty much starting from zero. But, cross country was fun, and Saint made it fun. We used to go to his house from time to time, and he would tell his stories about running marathons after he finished at Penn State. And I think that's what kind of motivated me to think about running a marathon was, his success and interest in running that far. So Dougherty, like I said, I was an average cross country runner for all 4 years, and I didn't really develop as a runner until my senior year in track. And I attribute that to, a couple things. One, I rode down on Boathouse Row, so the Schuylkill River. I did that before my senior year in high school. And I think that balanced out my muscles. Running can create a lot of imbalances. And I never had a major injury in high school or college. And I think that's a result of the benefits of the rowing. And then what I did before my senior year, I had a kind of a disastrous cross country. I thought I was going to be the number one guy on the team, but Mike Coffey, who went on to Notre Dame as well and was an All-American in cross country and track, he came out for his first race ever and he won the race. And it just kind of put me in a mental funk. So I had to learn how to get out of that. And it took me the whole season. And Saint said that, well, I've got enough milers. We didn't have a 2 mile at that time. So he said, why don't you run the half mile? And my best half mile as a junior was like 2:11. And he says, I think you can run 1:56. And I don't know where he pulled that out from. Maybe just looking at my stride or something. But he was pretty accurate because I wound up, like you said, I wound up running 1:55.4 at the Catholic Big Meet. And that was a big thrill, especially after I was also favored in the 440 that year. But we had I ran 50.8, kind of easing up in the trials on Friday. And then on Saturday, it rained, I guess. And so when we came back on Sunday, the LaSalle track was almost underwater and all the lines were obliterated. So they just lined us up on a straight line across the track. And for some reason, I got lane 7 on the outside. And, I had to run all the way around the first turn. So I probably ran an extra 10 yards or so. And then when I got to the finish straightaways, I just tied up badly. And I was devastated. But Saint kind of calmed me down and said, just go out. And Bobby Cubbins from Roman was my was it Roman? No, it's St. Thomas More, I guess, was my big competition. And he went out hard for the first lap, and I just stayed with him. And then Saint told me to kick with a 3:30 to go, and I did. I felt great. So that was running's all about learning how to win, but also learning how to lose, how to overcome it. Everybody loses at some point in time, so you just have to, do your best. So that's kind of Dougherty.
That's Dougherty. Well, I guess Notre Dame came calling. I know your teammate Franny Carver also had come to Notre Dame. So tell us about. I know you were probably recruited by a number of teams, but you go to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
What'd you experience there?
Well, you're right. Frank opened the door for a lot of us guys from Dougherty. I got to go there. Mike Coffey that I mentioned also went there, and Spiro was the fourth guy to go. So there's at least 4 of us that went there on scholarship, and it was a good program. It wasn't a great program, but it was fun. Frank was very successful there, and he was taking engineering, so he didn't have a lot of time to train, and he had a lot of labs, I guess. So he seemed to get injured a lot, so his career could have been a lot better, but he just couldn't stay healthy, and I think he was tired all the time from all his labs. But anyways, I started off, and I did better in college in cross country, because one of the things that I started doing before my senior year in high school was that I would run 5 miles around the Dougherty block before we did our indoor workouts. We had to wait until detention was over at Dougherty before in the cafeterias, the two huge cafeterias, before we could do our workouts. So Paul Minahan did this the year before when I was a junior, and he developed quite nicely that year. So I said, well, that's a good idea. So I did the same thing, and that got me a lot stronger. And then my sophomore year at Notre Dame, I started adding in a morning workout. And I had been reading about the people at the LA Track Club and Oregon and all the good programs, Villanova, of course, with Jumbo. And it seemed like the good runners were doing double workouts. And I can remember starting off with just a mile around one of the lakes there at Notre Dame, and then it about killed me. It took me the whole year before I got used to that. But eventually I got stronger, and that really helped my whole career at Notre Dame. And, like you mentioned, I won the indoor IC for a 2 mile, setting a new record. That was probably one of my highlights. And I always think I should have won the cross country that year in 1964, my senior year. A guy named Elmer Banton from Ohio U won it. And I had beaten him, I think, 2 other times that year. The guy I was concerned about was Jimmy Murphy from the Air Force Academy. Jim was on the 1964 Olympic team in the 5,000. And he had beat me. We had a dual meet. We went out to the Air Force Academy with the football team, and we had a dual meet there at 7,000 feet. And that was my first experience with running at altitude, and it was not a good one. And so Jim beat me there. So I was most concerned about him. So I kind of stayed with Jim and let this guy, Elmer Banton, get ahead. And he won the race by, I think, 7 seconds. I just never was able to catch up to him. And that was probably my biggest frustration. You're happy to get seconds, but you always look at what could have been, type of thing. So, but overall,
that's when it was
I'm
4
pleased
miles,
with
right?
my career. I'm sorry?
Was that when it was 4 miles, the distance?
Yeah, it was at Michigan State at that time, and it was still 4 miles. It didn't go to 5, I think, for a couple more years after that. So, and I never ran a 10K in college. I kind of, looking back on it, it might have been a good thing for me to try it. I didn't move up to the 3 mile until my senior year. As the first, we couldn't compete as freshmen. So second, third, and fourth year, I ran mostly miles and 2 miles. I would double back in the dual meets. And we had really good meets against teams like West Point with Bill Straub and the Michigan State guys, and went out to Southern Illinois and had a great meet there against a couple of British guys. And so, track was fun. And then I made a lot of friends. I still have Zoom sessions with a couple of the guys that I was on the team with. So
now was Squires there then, or he's
no, he had already graduated. His stories were still there. Everybody told stories about Billy Squires, but I never met him.
Okay. Well, that was terrific. And I know you ran the 2 mile. You won the 2 mile in the IC4A, so you must have gone against a number of Villanova guys and everything back in those days too.
Yeah. Eamon O'Reilly was, I think, the big competition from Georgetown, and he nicely led for a lot of the race. And I just was able to. I always had a good kick, so I kicked with about a lap and a half to go. And this was in the Garden, and I can remember my first time running in the Garden as a freshman. They had a freshman mile. That was one of the few races that we had, and I can remember. It was the afternoon. There was hardly anybody there, but I could still hardly stand up at the start of the race. My knees were shaking. It was such a big deal to run in the Garden. And then at night for the finals, a lot of my family was there. And at that time, I think nearly everybody smoked. So you could hardly see across the track. There was so much smoke. And I'd have a smoker's cough for the next couple of weeks after running in the Garden. But it was fun. And there again, I was able to use my speed. Thanks to Saint's quarter mile, half mile training, I had good speed and was able to win the race at the end.
Well, and what intrigues me the most is after Notre Dame, all your road racing and cross country. From there, you really took off on a national level, at that point. The Boston Marathons, famous race, obviously the Olympic trials and all those kind of things. So we're going to kind of delve into that a little bit, here. I guess what, we'll hit the Boston Marathon first. I believe that was 1968, or actually the Philadelphia Marathon you won in 1967. So you come back to your hometown, and that must have been pretty exciting winning the Philadelphia Marathon.
Yeah, it was. Actually, my first marathon was Boston in '67. And I went up there and I wasn't even entered in it. In those days, most races you could just walk up and sign up the day of the race. And I think there was 500 people in the race, so it was not a huge deal like it is today. And I ran with the leaders for about the first half of the race until the girls were screaming at us at Wellesley. And then I realized that I was way over my head. We were running like 5:15 pace, which was, the slowest pace I'd ever raced at. Every other race from the, 10Ks on the track or 2 miles indoors, everything else is faster than that. So when you're running 5:15 and you're used to racing at 4:30 or 4:40, it feels quite comfortable. But that soon ended. As soon as we hit the hills, I started cramping up, and I wound up running 6:15 for the second half of the race, and then I finished, I think, 21st in 2 hours and 27 minutes or something. So that was my introduction. So, and I'd only had one 20-mile run before that. So I went back. I was stationed in the Marines at Camp Lejeune at that time. So I went back and started adding some mileage to my training. I started doing 20-mile runs on Sunday. And a guy named Alex Breckenridge was there. Some of the people from Philly might remember him from his Villanova days. He was on the Olympic team in '52, and he was near the end of his career. He had made a career out of the Marine Corps, and so it was great. He had trained with Billy Mills in '64, so he told me some of the stories about how Billy trained and everything. And it made running long runs. There was nobody else down there that was training like us, so we go out for our Sunday runs. And Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, it's a very humid place and hot and humid. So you'd finish and you couldn't get any wetter. You'd just be completely drenched. But it was a delight to be able to train with a real gentleman like Alex. And then I got transferred back up to Quantico in '68. They said at that time, anybody that was a Marine Corps officer had to spend at least one tour in an overseas assignment, so one 12 or 13-month assignment. And so mine was Okinawa, and that's where I spent 1969 after my really good race in '68. But one thing being in the Corps opened up for me was the opportunity to go to any trips that I qualified for. So like you mentioned, I got to go to 2 international cross-country meets. And the first one was in 1967, and we went to Tunis, Tunisia. And Browning Ross, your friend, people that look at this will remember, was a great runner at Villanova, and he was an AAU official. So he managed the team. Herb Lorenz and Moses Mayfield were also on the team. And we had a couple, another guy from the Marine Corps, Tom Heineman from the Navy, and a couple guys from the Army. So it was a mostly military team. And we went to Tunis, and there they had us jumping over like horse hurdles. I had to almost climb over them to get over the hurdles. And I think I finished 21st in that race, and I believe I was the first American. And then we went on a tour through Africa. Was on a AAU tour to, if you can believe this, teach some of the African kids how to run. So the second place we stopped at was Addis Ababa at 8,000 feet. And so we would go out for these hard training runs, and little kids 8 or 10 years old would be running beside us laughing and having a good time while we're supposedly running really hard. But that was a great experience, and opened your eyes to a lot of stuff. We also saw Zambia and Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So terrific trip. And I think that set me up that was before the Boston Marathon. So I think we did a lot of hard training running 6 minutes or faster, at least the equivalent effort at altitude. And so when I got back, I think I was ready to run a good race at Boston. It set me up really well.
Yeah, before that, we skipped over. When you're in Philly, you set the course record in the Philly Marathon, running mostly, like you said, on the river. Most of the race, was on the river. So, there's a lot of, like, Moses Mayfield had won Philly a few times. Amy Burfoot, who you ran against
Yeah,
in Boston, won Philly. Like I said, Clarence DeMar had won it. So Philly has a lot of good runners who were
yeah.
champions. You being
No,
one
that
of
was
them.
fun. That particular day, Bob Scharf from the DC area was my big competition. And just reading back over the notes that he and I kind of broke away from the pack at about 5 miles, and we just were doing surges against each other for up and down the East River Drive. I think we went out to the Strawberry Mansion Bridge and then came back and went out again to get up to the marathon. And I wound up, I think I beat him by 7 seconds, and that was all in the last 150 yards or so. So once again, my speed helped me. But yeah, that was a thrill. Saint was in the car yelling at me as he could hear him anywhere. Like when we were in high school, he'd go to the Penn relays, and you could always hear Saint Clair yelling at you.
Oh, yeah.
You probably experienced that at Temple.
Yeah. Now, what brings us to what I think, which we hear all the time, that 1968 year where,
Yeah.
a couple of guys, you had the infamous 2 trial year, and tell
Yeah.
us, like, that whole thing.
Well, I can remember in 67 looking at in December at Track and Field News, looking at pictures of, Tahoe and, looking at the track that they were building up there. And I said, wow, I'd really like to make it up there to Tahoe. So I think maybe I had set my goals perhaps a little bit too low. Just making the trials, wasn't sufficient. But anyways, I had my best year ever of running that year. And the first trials were in LA, and it was primarily meant to be a money winning thing for the Olympic Committee. They had, 20 or 30,000 people there. And they said that if the winner from LA will be on the team as long as they are competitive, some kind of words like that up at Tahoe. So winning in LA wasn't sufficient. You knew you had to also be running well at Tahoe, which was in September. The first trials were in July in LA, and the second ones were in September. And in between, we had the marathon trial up at Alamosa. And I still thought of myself as a marathoner, so I decided to run those trials. And it turned out, the Olympic Committee invited people. I think like the top 20 times in the country, people got invited to come up there and run and train for a month or two, and then run the trials. And fortunate for me, my to-be wife, Ellen, was a student at Adams State. And Joe Vigil, the terrific coach from Adams State, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago,
Right.
she went up to him and said, "Can you teach me how to run?" And this was in 1968, way before Title IX. So there weren't many women running. And he got her up to, running like 5 miles a day. And she strategically was selling ice cream in the ice cream shop. So all the skinny runners would go in there after dinner and we talked. And that's how I met Ellen. So I introduced her to my friend Tom Larish, and he said, "Wow, she's running 5 miles a day. You should marry her." So I did. but yeah.
So I guess when it came around the second trials,
Yeah.
for the 10,000,
Yeah. So the marathon trials might have been a little bit too close. They were like August 15th or something, and the 10K was like September 8th, I think.
okay.
So it was only like 2 or 3 weeks. And I just, no, I never had a really good experience at altitude. Jack Daniels, the famous exercise physiologist, did a lot of testing. And he found out that, my efficiency was not that good. So it took more effort for me to run a given pace than it would, like a Frank Shorter he's running
Right.
at maybe 50% of his capacity, whereas I'm running at 70 or 80%. So, and I think so the people that had a better efficiency rate at sea level, like Bill Riley, who made the team, he's also in the Marine Corps, but he made the team in the steeplechase. Altitude wasn't a big problem for him. But for me, and I think Pat Trainer was another person that Jack identified, we were not that efficient. Pat was a pretty big guy, and he didn't make the team in the steeplechase. So
Yeah. So you had known going in, I better do well in this second
yeah,
trial
yeah. And
where,
I always figured that if Billy Mills was third or Jerry Lindgren was third and I was fourth, they weren't going to bounce those guys off the team. I figured that much out.
okay,
But you know, my good friend Laris and Van Nelson pushed the pace from the start because they didn't want to be around. I had beaten them in the first trials. I outkicked them on the last lap, and so they weren't going to wait around for me. And Tracy Smith didn't run the first trials, but he was there, and I think he was a hard guy to beat in those years. He was
sure.
really he's training under Igloy and was really fit, and he won the trials. And I think Van was second and Tom was third. So, and I think I was eighth or something. So I was not competitive. And so, under those circumstances, they did the right thing. They took the guys that made it on the team. I think Dave Patrick had a much stronger case than I did because he
Okay.
finished fourth, and Marty LaCory was like only a step or two ahead of him. So that was competitive. I think under those circumstances, they probably should have put him on the team.
And now at this time, I mean, I was that you must be working full time and training. Like what's because I know you moved
Well,
out to California and
I was still in the Marine Corps at that time, and
okay,
that was one of the benefits. There were a lot of people in those years that were like Trainer was in the Air Force, and guys like Tommy Farrell were in the Army at Fort Eustis or something out in California. So, we all had partial jobs. You didn't
okay,
have to work full time, and if you went on a trip, like all the trips I had in 1968, I was getting paid as for
okay,
my officer salary. It wasn't great, but at least it was money. And so yeah, it wasn't until after I got out of the service in 1970 that I went back to work for GE, and then I had to. Ellen and I had been married in early '69, and we had our kids right away. So that was a harder time for training. Like '72 was I wasn't nearly as fit at the '72 trials as I was in 1968.
well, you still came in fifth in the 10,000 meters and you came in 11th in the marathon in 72. So pretty good showing
Well,
considering where you were and everything. And that was
I think
a Frank
I had
Shorter year and
yeah,
some good
yeah.
runners.
That's where he and it was the great Prefontaine versus George Young 5K was the kind
Yeah.
of the highlight of the meet there. Uh, but yeah, I had a really good year in '71 when I was out of the service. Ellen was very supportive, and I was running 5 miles in the morning, going to work, working 8 or 9 hours, and then running again on the way home, and then trying to get 70, 80 miles a week. So that's when I set some American records for like the 1 hour run and the 2 hour run. I did those in 1971
Sure.
while I was working for GE down in San Jose.
And a fan favorite of Philadelphia, Bill Rogers went on to break those records, I believe.
Yeah, he
Um,
did. Yeah, I think
so
somebody else broke it before him, but
yeah,
he
yeah,
put them out of sight. I just barely broke them, but he put them in another country, I think.
yeah. Now you mentioned some really good personalities there that we know as legends. Jerry Lindgren, Steve Prefontaine, Shorter. Any personal stories about any of those guys you remember?
um, no, I didn't really know Prefontaine. He was a few years younger than me. He was yeah, he was probably 8 or 10 years so, and I was living here in California when he was running up in Oregon. So I ran a few races up there, but I wasn't on a trip with them or anything. You really got to know people when you went on a trip with them, like the ones to Africa, where I got to know people like Bill Norris and Tracy Smith, even Herb and Moses. I knew them from my Philadelphia days, but it was still, I was honored to be able to be on a trip with those guys.
No, it kind of, and I'm fascinated. So you ran. When was your last competitive race? Like you must have been 60, 70. Like I see all these times that you ran all the way up until like 1999.
Yeah, my last marathon was in I think '96 or something, and I was I was in my what 60s at that time, and I ran like a 2:56, and
Pretty good.
I said I don't want to be on the other side of 3 hours, so I decided that was enough. And
Mhm.
like a lot of people, my knees were bothering me, and I had some sciatica in '71. So you do build up some imbalances, and yeah, I still try to jog, but I haven't
Okay.
raced now since this. I don't think I've raced this century. I stopped in early 2000. No, I was running some of the cross country races that we have a really good program out here, uh, and my wife and I put on races for about 40 years just to
Oh man.
benefit some charities in this area. One was for the school that my kids went to, called the Willie's Road Race, and the other was the Run for Zimbabwe Orphans. Our son spent a year in Zimbabwe, and we got to visit him. And this was during the AIDS pandemic, and it was just devastating. This orphanage had 100 kids in it, whose parents had all died because of the AIDS pandemic. So we set up a nonprofit, and we put on before Ellen passed away. We put on 20 races, and we've now raised over $680,000 to support this orphanage over there. So that's been one of our labors of love. Trying to give back to the sport. Encouraging kids to run here, but then also think about the poor kids in Africa and helping them
Yeah.
out.
No, it's fascinating. I mean, it's been a fascinating career. I wouldn't want to close this without saying I think I mentioned earlier my best man and a Cardinal Dougherty graduate. He won the Catholic League cross country in 1971 and 72. Moved to out west and met you in one of the races. So he introduced
Yeah.
himself, and you didn't know him from Adam, but he just mentioned to me. He says, "Oh, when you see Bill Clarke, just mentioned that John Jennings from Cardinal Dougherty says hello." So, all right. Okay, but I'm glad that you came on board. A lot of the guys, I just went to. I think I mentioned it before. Been mostly in California a lot of the years, but you're still well remembered, well respected back here in Philadelphia as a legend. Sometimes when you disappear, your legend even gets bigger, I guess. So your name, the name Bill Clarke is pretty big around here as far as legendary distance runners from this area. So we're happy that you came, on board on our podcast today, and wish you well. You look great. Yeah, you look great now, and just continue doing what you're doing.
All right.
And
Thanks a lot, Dave. I appreciate it.
we'll mention to all your fans at Belmont Plateau, anyone who's listening, August 23rd, we'll have the Belmont Plateau Hall of Fame ceremony at Belmont. It'll be our ninth class going in. And besides Bill, we have Don Page, Jerry O'Reilly, Coach Wilfred Collin, and the Mark Gilman from who had run for Bishop McDevitt, and the 1998 women's Villanova cross country team that was coached by rookie Marcus O'Sullivan his birth year.
Oh,
So it
okay.
should be an exciting day, out there. So if you are there at 10 o'clock on August 23rd. All right, thanks a lot, Bill, and see you down the road.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Let me hit this stop button here. Uh-oh.